I'm calling to order this meeting of the RTM Finance and Budget Committee. This is our budget meeting, and it's starting at 7:33. Um, this is a special meeting, so we can't add anything to the agenda, but we can move things around. And since we have the Board of Ed here, um, item 12, if there's no um, objection, I'd like to move item 12 to the first item on our agenda. Um, Seeing no objections. All right. So I need a motion to discuss and take action on the Board of Ed request for a special appropriation in the amount of $755,000 for the purchase of vehicles for school transportation. Do I have, I have two people. I have Louisa moving. I have Jenny seconding. Um, Basically, I'm going to give a brief overview and then I'm going to hand it over to Rich. Um, what we're being asked to is just the purchase of the vehicles. There is analysis that will show that Rich and I were just talking about it. It's probably a year and a half payback, 400,000 the first year, and about 500,000 the next year. And Rich, if you don't mind, can you lead us through what you're buying, what the timing is, and other things like that? For those who have not read the 27 memos I've handed out on this. So, Rich,
Sure.
it's all you.
Okay. So the district is looking to insource its special education fleet of vehicles. And so the proposal is to purchase two more Suburbans, which are primarily used for out-of-district transportation and some ELP, preschool transportation in district, two wheelchair vans, and then two Type 2 vehicles, which are the 28-pack yellow school buses, so the smaller yellow school buses, and then three what's called like Sprinter vans, which would typically hold anywhere from 10 to 18 individuals. One of the reasons we explored this is when we put out to bid the contract for transportation, like a number of other districts, we received significant rate increases. And so the opportunity to do this internally is a very significant cost saving. So as Jack mentioned, it's about $400,000 to the operating budget in year one, and that'll escalate in year two because we are proposing to do this at the start of the regular school year as opposed to ESY, just given the timing. The payback would be about a year and a half, including the capital investment if it's approved. We did go to P&Z yesterday to talk about the parking at 35 Leroy for the Suburbans, and then 16 Thorndale Circle for the other vehicles, and it was well received, and we should be getting our official notice of approval on May 7th. Overall, we've already started soliciting applications for drivers, and we've gotten a lot of hits, so to speak, and so we're pretty confident we'll be able to staff this.
Hold on for a second. Whoever's playing the banjo, can we? I mean, Rich does really well with the banjo behind him. And maybe that should be a new thing at Board of Ed meetings, but go ahead. I'm sorry.
Sure, no, that's fine. So we have gotten a lot of hits for interested applicants and the drivers, so we're very confident we'll be able to staff it. The reason we are asking for it as an appropriation is the Type 2 vehicles and the wheelchair vehicles primarily. It's not like purchasing a car where you go to a dealership, you pick up the car off the lot and you kind of bring it home that day. It does take a bit of time to secure those vehicles. And then even with like the Suburbans, we actually have to turn them into a school bus. So once we actually get them off the lot, they have to be lettered. There's a special backup camera and like an alarm that has to go on it, the carrying school children sign. So a lot has to go into it to effectively turn those and the Sprinter vans into a school bus. And so in order to get this off the ground in August for the start of the upcoming school year, we're looking to be able to issue a purchase order next month so that we can secure the vehicles and have them available on site and then do the necessary work to turn them into the school buses.
I'm just going to add something else to it without getting into the detail. But there's been a team of people working with Rich and Jill and Alan on coming up with what the annual savings will be. They included myself, Bill, Jim Palin, Kate, Bush and John Zagroski. So this was a total team effort to make sure that the most conservative approach was taken for figuring out what the actual savings would be and what the costs that they're anticipating to have. Is that a fair statement, Rich?
That's correct.
Okay. So, so again, we're not voting on that because that's already in the Board of Ed budget as one of the reductions that they did at the time that the Board of Ed, or during the last couple of times that the Board of Ed voted on it. So the original request was 850 based upon the change of the vehicles. It's down to 755. I'm sure if Rich gets it even lower than that, we can make an adjustment on the floor of the RTM, not putting any pressure on you. But if not, 755 is a good number. Any questions?
Just one question. Labor markets are tight. Are we completely confident that there's not going to be a problem lining up the drivers?
We are. We've already started posting anticipated positions, and we've gotten a number of hits for drivers who are already fully licensed. So we're very confident we'll be able to fill those.
One of the people, Rich, do you want to just explain briefly? I believe the person who does our transportation, whatever the proper term is, and what her background is.
Sure. So one of the reasons we're able to secure as many candidates as we have is so our transportation director is a former location manager for First Student, and was a former location manager for a number of years, and had worked in the areas of Stanford and Ridgefield and Darien for a while. So she has a ton of connections to drivers throughout the state, and that's been very helpful in terms of getting feelers out there for people who are interested in coming here.
Right. One of the advantages is that we have pensions. We have a very nice healthcare program, and that provides some advantages over their other areas. Plus, you're driving a different set of students if you're doing this, and with smaller amounts. So, all right. Is there any other questions on that, or are we ready?
Yeah, Jack, I'm sorry. I have one. Hey, Rich, what's the useful life of these vans? I apologize if you stated it and I just didn't see it or hear you.
So it's typically 8 to 10 years. I mean, it depends on the mileage that you put in. The Type 2s and the Sprinter vans we're looking at are primarily in district, so we're not going to be putting a lot of miles on them in the year. The Suburbans go a little bit further, and so our first Suburban was purchased in 2016 and is slated to be replaced next year. So we're looking at that 8 to 10 year range.
Thank you.
I also believe that, and I'd mentioned this earlier, I don't how many miles it's driven is one thing, but I tend to believe that school buses and the Suburbans and other things like that are very similar to our police cars. We don't worry about the number of miles our police cars do. It's how many hours the engine is running, because frequently the police will stop and they have that engine running. So that's going to be determining service and life expectancy as well. But that's built in for why they can last 6-7 years, especially if a lot of it's local. Any other questions? Are we ready to vote?
Jack, this is not germane to tonight's discussion, but just one tiny correction. The board did talk about the retirement structure for the drivers, and we are actually going to use a defined contribution plan versus a pension plan.
Right.
And we've adjusted rates up. So when you see us do our budget adjustments over the month of May, you'll see us increase the salary line item accordingly. So just so everybody,
Right.
again,
Well,
not germane to tonight, but just so you have that.
A defined contribution is still a pension plan. So it's it's just a better type than what has been run in the past by a defined benefit. So yes, but that is an advantage that we have. And I believe you're going to be running the same one similar to the town, which is a 5-year cliff.
Yes.
555.
All right. And the contribution is a requirement, if I recall, on the town side.
Correct.
You don't have an option to opt out.
Correct.
So, anyway, all right. Are we now ready to go? Okay. All in favor? Say aye. Okay. It looks unanimous. Are there any no's? I don't see none. So that item passes. To members of the Board of Ed, you're more than welcome to hang out while we go through the rest of the 27,000 items on our budget agenda tonight. Or you can, since you also met last night, even though it was a short meeting, thank you very much for attending.
Thank you, everyone.
And we'll see you guys later. We are not
you.
going to be dealing with the security initiative tonight. We'll move that out to a later date. I tend to believe it's going to be it will be in the June meeting of the RTM, since the Board of Finance isn't meeting until after our RTM meeting. So there's no action that can be taken by them prior to our June meeting. Okay.
Thank you for your time, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much. Thank you for
Thank you.
support.
Okay, now we're back to our meeting and our agenda. So it looks like there's a lot here, but a lot of this has already been discussed. Sometimes I'll show a slide. I'm still working on some of them. Other times I'm going to provide the slides that I got from Jen. I'm still trying to reconcile one or two of them. But the first thing that we're going to have to do is make a special appropriation of $1,671,000 from the, I'll read it. Discuss and take action on the special appropriation of $1,671,000 from unassigned fund balance to a reserve fund of capital non-recurring expenditures to fund capital projects that would otherwise have been funded through property taxes in the fiscal year 2025 budget as authorized. So let me see if I can get that. Okay. So
Are you moving that for discussion?
what? I know I first need to have a motion to do it, and I need a second. So I have Jenny as a motion to do. I'm not seeing anybody else, so I see Beth's hand. That's our second. So basically what the Board of Finance did is have a long conversation on how much of our fund balance they were going to use. So far this year, the only action that we had was $2,600,500 for the consultant for the harbor dredging coming out of special appropriation. There were anticipated to be about $4 million coming back on revenue. Town expenses are about $870,000. That's predominantly due to vacancies. Remember, we've had some staff positions that have not been filled, and the projected Board of Ed deficit that they're currently running was $210,000 at the time, but I believe that may be down to about 180, 190. So we'll get that number and deal with that in June. We're not going to deal with their deficit now. But that generated about $4.7 million incremental funds going back into the general fund. Now, there's a lot of discussion, a lot of numbers, but I'll give you the one that I use. We want to maintain our fund balance at about 16% of what our revenues are. Now, some people say 15, and some people even mention 12. If we ever get to 12, we're not doing well. We're going to start taxing to refund things like that. The agencies do not want us down that low. So that was a guidance that was set. The Board of Finance is going to work on new guidance during the summer. The other thing to consider is that Moody's did a change in what they're looking at for the ratings. And what I'm going to ask is Jen to attend one of our next meetings, maybe in June, to explain the new situation for how they're looking at ratings. And if we film it, then maybe we can distribute it to the RTM. Anyway, after a long conversation, the Board of Finance decided to allocate $3.5 million to be used for special appropriations and for the capital projects. Also understand that as our budget is going up significantly, the amount that we need to have, even to meet the 16%, increased as well. So just because we're getting back 4 million doesn't mean that everything is going to be spent. Out of that $4 million, they allocated 755 for the Board of Ed Transportation Initiative that we just passed. The Board of Ed also has a security initiative for 1,074,000. That one's up for discussion, and that's something that we'll get back to you on. There's two other things that are outstanding. One is a fire engine, which is approximately $1 million. That was taken out of the capital request. It's not finalized. We do know that what happens with our fire engines when we're purchased, it is now taking 900 days to get a fire engine delivered in the United States. I jokingly said to somebody earlier today, I can get a brand new Aston Martin built sooner than a fire engine. So what happens is 1 year from when we finally put in the order, we'll pay 25%, and the 75% is typically due upon receipt. So that's going to be bonding. There's a whole bunch of discussion going on about the Great Island Master Plan that they opened the bids. I'm not getting into a conversation about what it is, but preliminary conversations were initially that might be a special appropriation, and that was considered when we're looking at what we're going to allocate in that. At this time, on some preliminary conversations that we had based upon the size that it is at this current time, I would expect that coming back to the RTM once the Board of Selectmen approve and the Board of Finance approve as an item to be bonded. And I know we don't want bonding, but that's something that in my conversations with people I do agree with. And number two, there is conversation that does not qualify as an acquisition cost or remediation cost. So the $6 million that's hanging out there from the allocated ban that from the original $103 million authorization, those funds cannot be used for the Great Island Master. So if you allocate the transportation and the Board of Ed security initiative, that left 1.671 left for allocation back to capital. By the way, for anybody who's new to this, the only time that the general fund can be used is to pay down debt, to pay for capital, or in case of an emergency, it cannot be used to pay for operating expenses. So that can't be used to reduce the budgets of what we receive from the Board of Ed or the Board of Selectmen or the library. So is there any questions on the on how we got this money and the 1.671?
Yeah, Jack, if I may, my one question is, the money that has not been spent out of the Great Island authorization, can we simply create a motion and resolution to authorize the town to do so, or is that a statutory prohibition?
No, it's in. Jen and I had a conversation on this. While the bond resolutions are a little bit wide in certain things, it would not qualify under the bond resolution that we approved in the RTM or by the Board of Finance.
Well,
so there's nothing we can do.
We can't amend that at
Nope.
a later date?
Nope. Whatever comes for that Great Island, we'll deal with a new bond or for an appropriation. But that's going to probably be in June. So we're not going to deal with that today. All right. Any other questions on 1.6 going forward? If not, we're ready to vote.
Hey, Jack, I'm sorry to be.
No.
Must be too many years since I had accounting classes, but like, could you explain? I mean, it's a small item anyway, but the $26,000 for the harbor consultant. why is that a positive and not a negative item in the list that you had up? Could you just,
Oh, it may just have been the sign that I had. It's a negative item. It should be reducing the.
okay, good. So
Right.
fine. So it is. So
Right.
it
What I
also
just-
should be negative. Okay, fine.
Right. Yes. No, this is, I'm throwing numbers up. And quite honestly, I have the master plan, but I know that there's certain tweaks from when the Board of Finance did the budget that aren't in there. So I'm just creating my initial slides that we reviewed last year.
Yeah, no, that's-
And then I got to sit down with Jen and go and say, I'm not equaling this one. I'm equaling that. Where am I off here? Where are we off?
I wasn't worried about the amount as much as making sure that we have a clear logic as what's a credit and what's a debit to
No,
what
that'll
account on
be,
what side of the balance
Yeah,
sheet. That's all.
yeah, that was just
Fine.
done earlier today in between
Fine,
some
thanks.
phone calls.
It's all good.
Yes, I appreciate that because I'll make sure that that gets corrected. But so, yeah, what I am going to try and do, I'm trying to get, usually I'm working like the weekend before the budget to get all the slides together. I'm hopeful that by next week, I have virtually all the slides that we want to present completed. I will not be showing them up on a screen because nobody except the front row can read them. So I will be handing them out and, sending them electronically and making some copies for us to go through. But again, this is going to be about between 15 to 20 slides to get through the whole budget process. But it's a lot easier. But I will send it out for everybody to look and ask any questions before I distribute. Okay, so we're ready to go on the 1.6 million. All in favor? It's unanimous. Next item. To discuss and take action that the appropriation of $4,205,547 is hereby made from the reserve fund for capital and non-recurring expenditures for the purpose of meeting expenses of the town of Darien as shown by the budget this day approved. That, let me see if I can get to that slide. Have that. Let me go back to Zoom.
Jack, can I interrupt you a minute?
You
Was
can
there-
do. Go ahead.
Did we skip over an agenda item? Sorry.
Oh, yeah, I missed
Item
that
3.
other one. Yeah, 3. Okay,
Sorry.
that's all right. I'm trying to get this done real quick.
Okay.
All right. So, all right, we can deal with 4 before we deal with 3, and we'll just go back to 3.
Okay.
All right, so let me share the screen. That's this. If you're seeing some numbers here, and that it's because
We have to move it.
I,
We have to move it
there we go.
first.
Okay, so we can move it. Can you see people, Jenny? Or is the screen blocking out?
I can see some people.
Okay, so I have Jenny moving. Somebody yell out that they're seconding this.
Second, Bill Smith.
Okay, Bill, that's perfect. Thank you. So this is the basic capital request for the town. I'm doing some additional work on this because when I really look at what capital for the town and the Board of Ed this year, there's been a lot paid by ARPA. There's been a lot paid out of the reserve fund for capital non-recurring expenses contingency. I'm going to move that here. And I'm off by about $633 right now. And I think it has to do with the closeouts. But all these negative items are basically capital that did not end up in the budget process and were done throughout the course of the year. Some of them are more immediate on what goes on, but this isn't what we want to have done. And I know that one of the things on the police department is they moved it that Ed Gentile is going to start taking over managing the building because that building's had problems since the day we built it. But to make sure that these items start getting into the 6-year capital plan. So, or we have better estimates. So I am going to be looking, saying, yes, this is what we're requesting, but we also paid for capital in 2024 by going into the contingency in the reserve fund for capital. And that fund is funded, that little contingency is funded by the closeouts when we complete a project. If there's any extra, it goes into that account. We haven't made a contribution into that in all the years that I've done it. So, and Bill, I don't know, do you recall them ever doing that either? So we don't, I'm assuming he hasn't. So all I'm saying is that there's a lot of things that appear as if this is the only capital, but there's a lot more capital that has gone on. And the $1 million request for the Board of Ed for their security initiative is not in the $2.9 million item that they've requested. So that's a capital. The special appropriation for the 755 is capital. That is not in that line for 2024. So when I'm looking at some of these things, or 2025, I want to sort of capture that to say, look, there's a lot of other moving parts here, so that it looks like, oh, we only have $6 million of capital expenditures. We have more, and so that's what I want to capture.
Jack,
so that's
why don't we have it on the chart then? I'm just curious. I mean, it's
because this is what was handed to us and what was approved in the budget. The other things were paid. This is what's going to be paid through taxes or by use of the 1.6. The other things were being paid by other sources, whether or not it's ARPA or the special appropriation from the general fund or the use of the capital contingency. And so part of what I'm trying to do is capture all that and working on that so that we have, at least in the RTM, a full understanding of what was spent and what wasn't. So is there any questions on the Ed or town capital here? If not, then we can vote on that. Share, that way I can see everyone. Seeing no questions.
When you say town, it just means Board of Selectmen, basically, right? For the avoidance.
Only the Board of Selectmen.
Yeah. Got it, thanks.
So, included in the Board of Selectmen capital are certain capital initiatives for the volunteer fire departments. But that's a town expense because we purchase the fire engines, or if there's certain repairs to their building, we may be initiating those repairs and paying for it, even though the volunteer fire department own their buildings. So, but we're still getting a good deal with the volunteers. So, yes, that's what I mean by that. So we're ready to vote? All in favor? Great. Back to item 2. Nope, item 3, sorry. This is discuss and take action on the fiscal year 24 through 29 and 25 through 30 capital improvement plans that are approved as presented in the fiscal year 24 and 25 proposed budgets. So we have been doing this effectively when we moved our budgets in prior years. However, the state wants a more formal process. And part of that is to ensure that the grant that we get for LoCIP, which is for part of our capital improvements for our roads and that, is in the plan. But they want to see the whole plan. So this is the first year that we're actually approving. I've already gotten comments from both Amy Zabatakis for P and Z, from Adele Connor for the Park and Rec, and Max looking at it, and he believes we'll get that tonight. We looked at Public Works. I've looked at the Board of Ed. So what we're saying is that it's materially correct. We can't certify that everything is in there, and we're going to be having this as part of the future budgets and making sure that all the departments are putting in their 6-year capital of what's, so we're not finding surprises like the security initiatives coming out of the Board of Ed. If nothing else, you put down Board of Ed security and you have a number there. But for us tonight, all we're doing is approving it. We've had some of the other departments look at it. I've looked at it. And so is there any questions on this? I've handed out both charts of what's there. It's about a 16-page document. It's fun reading. And seeing no questions, we're ready.
We needed to move it.
Oh, I thought we did.
No.
No, see, I'm moving without moving. Okay. We got Bill moving, and I'll have Holly second.
Which bill? Which bill?
Jeez. Bill Dunn.
Thank you.
I have to put a little note on my computer, you know, which Peter, which Bill. So, all right. So that's moved. Are we ready to vote? All right, all in favor, say aye.
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 All right. F&B actually will vote on every one of the line items within the budget resolution that is handed out. We're the only committee that does that. In fact, the Board of Finance will do some, but sometimes they just do the whole resolution. So the next thing up for grabs is the discussion and approval of the Board of Selectmen operating budget. So it's discuss and take action on the appropriation of $53,584,247 is hereby made in the general fund for the Selectmen's operating budget. Do I have some?
Oh, go ahead. I was
Can
going
I
to say move.
Yeah, I was doing that.
Okay.
Thank you. We can keep this going. I need somebody to move it. I'll take Louisa and I'll take Charles as the second on that. We've all looked at this. Unless somebody's proposing to cut something here, we pretty much at this time can just move that forward. In my analysis, what I'll do is, while the budget looks like it's increasing by over 8%, different from the Board of Ed budget, the town revenues are not netted against the expenses. You'll see later on that we'll figure out what the total expenses are that we need to fund, including capital and the operating expenses. And then we'll go and reduce the revenue to determine how much needs to be determined by taxes. So these numbers I'm still working on, but the you can see I'm a little bit off by 8820. I think I know where it came from, but these are the numbers that I'm taking off the master plan. The one that's in the resolution is the accurate one. Wait, let me just share that again. Okay, so that's the basic budget. I'm going to find out where the 8820 is, but essentially what this is it's the town operations, the library grant, and then debt service. So debt service is down a bit, but it does include that they did another ban to roll over of approximately 40 million. So we're only paying interest on that. Some of the interest may have been capitalized in the new ban, and I'm trying to clarify that before we go to the board of the RTM for our final budget approval. That's, if it is, that's just kicking interest expense down the road. But there was, part of it was in the budget, part of it was using the premium from when we issued the ban, and then I'm trying to make sure that the rest wasn't capitalized into the new ban. So that's one of Jenny's and my fun thing that we're doing. So is there any questions on the Board of Selectmen budget that includes these three items? Hearing none, it sounds like we're ready to vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Next on the list is discuss and take action on the appropriation of $119,864,475 is hereby made in the general fund for the education operating budget. Again, just a reminder for anybody who might be listening to our meeting, we're going to move it. I just want to make this one comment. We can cut, we cannot add. So I'm trying to encourage people who may not have been happy with the reduction made by the Board of Finance to, you can come to the RTM and say, I'm not happy, but explaining inflation, which really doesn't affect the Board of Ed budget, explaining that everything in the world should have been purchased and that there's nothing that could have been removed from that budget is nice, but it has no bearing on what the board of that the RTM is going to be doing on our budget night. We cannot change the budget unless somebody comes forward and says that they want to cut the extra 500,000 that wasn't cut before by the board.
So Jack, just for the avoidance of doubt, the 119,864, it would be 121,864 without the $2 million top-down reduction target given by the Board of Finance. Is that right?
That's correct.
Fine, good. So so my point is we are aligned with the Board of Finance. They said to the Board of Education, you guys go and find the $2 million, however you do it, and we're backing them up. That's the point, right?
Well, we don't have a choice. The fact of the matter is we can't add any part of that $2 million back. But if we wanted to cut more, we could do that. Now, I'm not proposing we cut any more. So that makes us in line with what the Board of Finance is presenting to us.
Perfect. That's all I wanted to know.
Right. So now we'll move. Jenny, is that what you wanted? All right. I need somebody to move it. Nick, I'm going to pick on you just because you were a little bit slow on the last one. And Holly, I'm going to give you the second. Saves people raising hands. We're going to get everybody involved tonight. Is there any other discussion on the Board of Ed? Again, one of the things, we had our conversations on it. It is, in the past, I did what was drivers and other things like that. I am not sure that the Board of Ed will make changes to their budget. They only have to do it by July 1st. But I'm not sure that they're going to make any changes in time for us to report what are the main drivers to this budget, what's growth versus core, because we don't know what the final numbers will be. They have to recast and vote on that. But I will talk high level on the Board of Ed. And I had a conversation with Ed Rushecker, and we both agreed, based upon this modification to their budget, that both of our reports will be very short. Okay.
Jack,
Well,
maybe.
Go ahead.
Sorry, just I'm still a little unclear. So we can't vote to increase it at all above what it is now. And you said we could vote to decrease it, but like decrease, like we can actually vote to decrease by a certain amount, or we just vote to go back to the prior year? I confused.
Okay, so let me give you a little clarification. If this budget if any school budget is rejected at the RTM meeting, it goes back to the prior year, and then the Board of Ed comes back to us with a revised budget. All right? They have to go to the Board of Finance and to us with a revised budget. But we're only giving them a total appropriation. So we're not, and you didn't hear the Board of Finance saying, you know, take it from here, take it from there. When this Board of Ed budget was about 50 million, that's dating myself on how long I've been doing this. There was a discussion during our charter revision of whether or not they should allow the RTM to add to a budget because we wanted them to do something. Problem is we're only doing a total appropriation, and hence we have no control over what their line items are. And while those line items, you know, that pretty thick book, I said this before, Rich does a pretty good detail on what's our line items for all those cost centers. And they come out to be reasonably accurate at the end of the year if you consider how much data he does and other things like that, with some minor movements going on. But the fact of the matter is that we have no control what they spend it on. And my quote is that after we approved a $50 million budget, if they wanted to buy $50 million of crayons, they could. Now, they'd all go to jail, I'm sure. But the fact of the matter is that we don't have the authority to tell them what to do with their money. We do on the Board of Selectmen side. On the Board of Selectmen, we can cut something, and then they're in theory not allowed to go beyond that. So, but if we really wanted to apply something to the Board of Selectmen, we could, let's say, if somebody wanted to have cut the Board of Selectmen, we could have cut the cost for hauling the recyclables, because that was a big number this year. And then that would allow the Board of Selectmen to reallocate that amount to get the same $200,000 cut. But we can't go blanket to the Board of Selectmen and say, we want to just reduce you by 200,000. You figure out where to take it. We do that with the Board of Ed. So.
Hey, Jack. So to that point, the $2 million reduction, obviously we don't know what that's going to be because it's to the discretion of the Board of Education. But where did that $2 million number come from? Because that appears to be maybe a 1.5% reduction over what the BOE originally proposed. So I'm sure it's not an arbitrary number. Can we get some clarity as to how that $2 million was derived?
It was totally arbitrary. All you have to do is watch the meeting and you hear all the different numbers being thrown out. Well, how about 2.5? How about 2.25? How about 2? How about 1.5? I mean,
look, we did an analysis I did, and we presented here, came in at about 1.2 to 1.6. All right. And the way we did it, or at least I did it, was teachers are getting a 4% increase. The salary constitutes 65% of their budget. If I lower it to 3%, because there are some people, we're not getting turnover, not everybody got a 4%, but even at 3.5, it says that their budget goes up by 2.1 to 2.6 right to the get-go. Then we looked at what the outplacements were, was the increase in that. They had a 6% increase in their healthcare. The 13% that everybody was mentioning, that's what the premiums went up, but the actual healthcare costs went up only by 6%. And that represents something like 15% of the budget. So 6 times that is approximately 9.9%. And when we did that, it was someplace in the range between 5 to 5.5%. And that still gave them some leeway at a 3% guidance for the miscellaneous major areas that wasn't there. If they want to add a person, they got to figure out where they're taking it from if they were going to meet some guidance. Now, the question is what the guidance was. I'm not getting into that. That was a discussion that the Board of Finance had, and it was a active discussion. And the original proposal was 2.5. And I'm not putting David, who's attending here, on the spot by asking him to describe it, but it was 2.5. Members of the board moved it to 2. 2 of the board members voted against it. David was one. Paul Hendrickson was the other. So, do I believe there's room in that budget that can be adjusted? Absolutely. Am I going to comment on whether or not it's 2 million or that? Hey, the horse has left the barn. We're getting it with a $2 million reduction, and it's up to the Board of Ed to figure out how they're going to address that. I mean, they have some tough decisions, but you have to remember also, my little pet peeve for this year, they moved the $150,000 of desks in, and nobody thought to reduce that by $100,000. All right. So the superintendent came in, and I'm going to say something just so nobody misunderstands. We voted for a very nice contract for our teachers to make sure that they're competitive. We've still lost 70 teachers this year based upon the most recent information, which is a large amount. So we voted a high contract, but that's also because we want to keep our good teachers. So, but that 4% isn't the reason. That 4% doesn't say that the budget's up by 4%. As I just went through, it's only up by 2.1 to 2.6% because of that, because not everybody got the teacher increase. We have paras, we have nurses, we have other custodians, staff, and other things like that aren't getting that. When I say teachers, by the way, it's professional staff. So it's the school psychologist, anybody who's certified in the school is part of that union. So it's really the certified staff union. We just refer to it constantly as the teacher contract. But yes, it was a high contract, but we also all approved it, and we want to keep as many of our good teachers as we can. And sometimes you have to pay money for them. But, there's other things that I believe they had an opportunity to change, and they didn't. You can't, as somebody told me, I'm relating somebody else's story to me recently. You can't keep on, if you care for the kids, you can't keep on raising your hand every time somebody says boo that you want something without understanding what the consequences are. We've mentioned that if you're introducing a program, instead of just talking to us about the year that you're implementing it, give the rest of the board what the 5-year cost of that program is going to be. Well, there's a lot of 5-year course programs that they've approved over the prior 3, 4, 5 years. And I'm not saying they shouldn't have, but those costs catch up. I'm a very big supporter of social emotional, but if you're going to spend $100,000 on a program to support social emotional, you either got to figure out what you're not doing as business as usual to cover that cost, or look for other efficiencies. So they looked for the transportation efficiency this year, which is saving $400,000. Those are efficiencies in other areas that they're going to have to look at over the years, and to try and still move forward. But
Jack, I mean, we don't have to debate this, but what parents expect in schools has also changed. So you can't just add and then expect a cut all the time. And it doesn't really matter for the purposes of us because we either cut this budget more. But I absolutely disagree that you add social emotional and they should have cut a commensurate.
No, I'm not saying.
I
But
mean,
I'm not saying cut something else, but you have to look at what other efficiencies you can gain.
okay, well,
in your
when you
system.
can't gain it, what if you can't gain anymore? I mean, it's just
Then that's part of the budget.
it's just what people want to pay, right?
Right.
And this budget, maybe parents would have been willing to pay for it, but the Board of Finance was not willing to support it, which was their prerogative. So,
But also, I think that the Board of Ed did not do their job.
Yeah.
I agree with that. I totally agree with that. I think the presentation was terrible. But
Yes.
what parents want in a school system is just more expensive now. And what teachers demand to teach is more expensive now. So we're going to have to come to some reckoning with it. That our superior schools are going to cost more unless we do something differently, whether it's, cut back on our world-class athletic system, have bigger class sizes, combine with New Canaan. I mean, there's your efficiencies if we made our district bigger. I'm not advocating for that. I'm just saying we have, it's going to be some big decisions.
But that's all I'm saying here. All I'm saying is that you have to start looking. Some of the simple ones I said is, do we have to, on the athletics, or do we have to replace the athletic uniforms on the schedule we're currently doing? Or what about the technology where we have teachers that are keeping their laptops in a desk and not using it? We're not getting measurements on it.
Yeah.
I'm a big one that says things that get measured get managed, but I'm concerned that nobody at this time was able to relate to me when I asked, based upon the high level categories of our special ed. Yes, we're seeing more PPTs, but what categories are we seeing that increase in? Is it the high needs, or is it we're seeing more social emotional? And if we're seeing more social emotional, that's a very good thing that we're seeing it. It means we've been successful in other areas. But you don't just not measure it and then throw another assistant principal out there.
Yep.
And that's
Jack, I'd like to, I have 3 disappointments here, maybe 4. So I echo your comment, the disappointment in that the Board of Ed doesn't take a more critical look at some of the things that somebody would think would be heresy, like cutting, maybe we don't need as many coaches, or we need, whatever the cost of the sports is, which is very high. And I love sports. As a former high school and college athlete, I love sports. But I think it's so big in this town that maybe we need to think critically about our spending there and how we could do that better for the same amount of money or less. And the other things that you mentioned. So I'd like to see the board take a more critical look and present things in a more effective way, because, as someone said recently, if somebody could show me that we need to spend more money than over, I think Malin's comment, if we spent more money over guidance, if you can justify it, we'll vote for it and support it. So that's number 1. Number 2, I am disappointed in how the Board of Finance has approached this. I concur with Paul Hendrickson's analysis that the guidance is not reasonable. I think it's practically, it's arbitrary. What is sustainable is a purely subjective determination by the taxpayer of this town. And, everybody wants a free, the primary difficulty with the board's analysis is that we want everything, and nobody's willing to make really, really, really difficult choices. But so if you want everything, but you're not willing to pay for it, then you're asking for a free lunch. And it's a former law partner of mine used to say 20 years ago, there ain't no such thing as a free lunch. I feel like I was taken aback by the Board of Finances mentioning the teacher's contract and healthcare as being these big drivers, and yet I feel like saying to them, well, it's interesting because, especially with the teacher's contract, if there's Board of Finance participation on that contract negotiation, if there were, well, then you're precluded from complaining about it and using it as a basis to make cuts. Either you support it or you don't. And And even with what really under my skin is the idea that well, we've approved and supported everything because we've approved HHR and we've approved Oxbridge, and somehow that is something that's this great, we should have a medal for. Well, all these 3 schools that are being renovated were falling apart and decrepit, and many of us have done the school tour and seen how bad it is. And Oxbridge was falling apart and decrepit and needed to be rebuilt. So we did what we should be doing, what should be expected of us, and it shouldn't be used as an example to say, well, to offset or to deflect criticism for the cuts. We all want to, everybody in this town wants everything. We want the best schools, we want the best police, we want the best services, and frankly, we want the best, biggest park in the world. I love Great Island, but less than a year ago, I stood up and voted against it because I knew that this was going to happen, that we were going to have tax.
Great Island, I'm going to cut you off. Great Island absolutely has no impact on what's going on in the schools. The schools got a $5 million increase. They did not do their job. They had a superintendent make a recommendation. They turned back every one of those recommendations. They looked at other revenues. They turned back every revenue. The Board of Ed member actually said, I'm not beholden to deal with the finances. That's not why they were elected.
Jack,
they have a fiscal responsibility. I'm not going to listen to Great Island being the issue here.
Jack, let me finish. It's an issue because it affects what we as a town believe is, quote, sustainable in our budget. What is and isn't sustainable, and what we're willing to pay on. And if we want to, if we want to have all these things, then there's no such thing as free lunch, and we have to pay for it. And that's exactly what I said in front of the entire RTM last June. And I knew this was going to happen. And again, I would like the board to be more disciplined and move and make better decisions. I would like the superintendent to present things and be more critical from the very start of the budget process. It's not either or. These are all contributing factors, and that's the reason why I'm making the point.
Well, I have a comment.
Go ahead, Jim.
So Peter, I listened to the Board of Finance meeting. I didn't hear the Board of Finance criticize the increases from teacher contracts and healthcare. I heard them say the teacher contract were already baked in to the costs, and that the healthcare costs are the healthcare costs. It wasn't a criticism. What I heard was there was a comment about inflation impacting, the reason why the education budget's higher is because of inflation. And I think it was explained that inflation really didn't hit the education budget. What inflation hits are the taxpayers who pay for the education budget. But the drivers of the education budget were really not driven by inflationary pricing. That said, Jack is right on Great Island. We've not begun to actually pay for interest because we've capitalized the interest on the notes and on the bonds. So Great Island's not hitting this budget right now.
It's minor.
It's not that the Board of Ed, if the Board of Ed budget, if this is what's coming, education is getting this expensive, and we just need, they got a new security sale. They got a new security.
Exactly.
They hired 7 FTEs off cycle. So that's not a one-time, we had some surpluses and we're going to buy iPads. We're now stuck with that, which I'm not debating that, but that is now built in and baked into a budget, and it's a big number. So
it's
that
500,000 to 600,000 a year on this security.
Which came out of which we didn't really feel, we didn't talk about that last year. That when you're comparing last year's Board of Education budget, you actually have to look at the modified budget, which includes that FTE. So but what's more important is what are the other things that are happening in the town, like $160 million of school debt between Oxbridge and HHR that's coming. We are going to have to start amortizing Great Island. We've got police pension. There are pension contributions went up because the actuarial reports changed. And I don't know what happened to performance. I don't know if performance on the portfolio had anything to do with the fact that we had to pay in more money. But those are things that are also kind of can be an aberration. We may not have any increase next year. We may not have any increase in healthcare costs. There's a period of time in the Board of Ed budget where they had very nominal increases in healthcare costs. I think we've had the Board of Ed, I think, really tried to look at all the services, including Board of Ed's the giant gorilla, the 800-pound gorilla. And my personal opinion is, you can have anything you want. You can't have everything you want right away. Can some of this wait?
Yeah.
Because
I'd like to weigh in there, Jenny.
Sure.
There are, according to the stats that I looked up a couple of weeks ago, as Jack knows, there are 6,980 households in Darien. Of the households in Darien, 3,200 have children and 3,800 do not. And I'm not saying, I recognize that those of us who no longer have kids living at home, I assume that many of us did at some point, but I'm, for example, I no longer have kids living at home. And I recognize that when I pay my taxes and a good school system helps the value of my house and helps me attract good people into the town that do other things. But we as an RTM have to represent the people who have kids at home as well as those who do not. And one of the problems that we have in this town, in my opinion, is that there are a lot of people who, I'll pick a number, once they hit 55 or 60, right? And their kids are no longer in the school system, they can't afford to live here. They don't want to pay the taxes anymore. They're forced to downsize. They're forced to move to, other locations, et cetera, et cetera. So my feeling as an RTM is that we have to represent the interest of all the people that live here, whether or not they have kids. I think we all know that having, a Mercedes school system is absolutely terrific. Do we need the Mercedes with the air-cooled rear seats, which is an extra? I don't know. And I do feel sometimes that, in my experience watching the Board of Ed many, many times, is they will always go straight for the Mercedes with the air-cooled seats in the front and the back. And my own view is that I don't hear enough discussion about things like usage-based charges. We have a golf team. We have a ski team. I mean, if I want 3 kids in the ski team, then maybe I should be paying the ski team trips to New Hampshire on Saturday. Why does that get paid for out of taxes? I'd like to know that.
Well, we have a member who has
golf team. I mean, I had a daughter who was on the golf team. Okay, but why? So my daughter can play golf on the golf team. Why are we paying that out of our taxes? If the kids want to play golf at Weeburn and golf in Augusta in the summer, then let them do it. But the parents that want to do that can fork out $1,000 to make that happen. And I don't see why that should be, and then why that should be spread like peanut butter by means of a tax system. And I don't think we spend enough time talking about the balance of how we finance things versus taxes versus usage-based charges. Anyway, excuse me, I've said my piece.
I agree with you, Charles.
And folks, can I also add that,
Wait, Beth has her hand up. I want Beth to respond to that.
Because Jack knows what I'm going to say, which is that
yes,
the ski team already pays for itself. The ski team, the hockey team, the sailing team, those teams the parents already write big checks for directly to the school system in order for the teams to exist. So really what you should be looking at is more like the lacrosse team, which has home uniforms, away uniforms, everything they want. Great. And that is funded directly by the taxpayers.
Okay.
The ski team all pay for their own helmets. The hockey team all pay for their own helmets.
Well, anyway, Beth, I wasn't making
I know, but the point,
I'm really making the point of usage-based charges versus what gets paid for by general taxes.
Well, I understand that, but the point is that some of the Cadillac stuff you're talking about is already paid for by the parents, not generally throughout the town.
But Beth, if we go a little bit outside of sports, because I know, having had kids who were captains of teams, how much fundraising we also did at the time to help contribute to the sports programs. But I will say, I agree with Charles with the regard that not only do they want the Mercedes with the back seat, sometimes they're coming in, and this is my car of the week, but they're talking about why we don't have an Aston Martin, and that's the problem. And the fact of the matter is not everyone has a 3-car garage, a place in Vermont and a place down south someplace.
Yes.
And we have a responsibility to everyone in this community. And I'm not talking about kids and other things like that. Just, for those with the kids, those are that. We also have kids that are in our school systems that get discounted lunches. So it's there has to be a balance. We do have programs where subsidize certain kids in our park program or even in sports, which is what we should be doing.
But just to reiterate, 54% of the households in the town of Darien do not have kids.
Well, I think, Charles, you saw I think the Board of Ed, and I know David's on the call. I think the Board of Ed did that. I'm sorry, Board of Finance. I think the Board of Finance, in making the decision to cut the Board of Ed with the arguments of, that there's an increase, but there's just not as much of an increase that they wanted, and can some of this wait? And I think that's what I heard John Zagrodzky talk about. We have services at all levels: Parks and Rec, Public Works, Police. We've got debt to manage. We've got, the board, and the Board of Ed's had a lot of support. We've had a lot of support for them. So I think they tried to do that in looking like, it can't always be 100% about the schools, because there's other services that we have to provide too. So it's a tough year.
Let me be a little more blunt. I moved from the city up to Stanford because I got transferred to Price up here in Stanford as opposed to in the city, and I was tired of reverse commuting. I moved to Darien not because it had the absolute positive best school in the system. I moved to Darien because of the commute into New York. And quite honestly, if I wanted to have an equal system, I could have moved to New Canaan. I could have moved to Westport. All of those are our peer schools. There's some others that are further north, but their commute is absolutely out of the world. And Westport is, at that time, because they didn't have the speed limitations, was about 10 minutes longer if I left from Westport to commute into the city. So everybody who keeps on saying it's the schools, it's the schools, it's the schools. No, it's not. It's the schools. But for us, it was number one, because both of us working in the city eventually, again, it was the commute into the city, and I was going to Wall Street. That was important to me. It was the beaches that we had, and it was the schools that were also there. And, at that time, because I've been here for over 30 years, I can't say that our downtown was equal to either Westport's or New Canaan's. So, those were the drivers for us. And the last thing was low taxes. And so I moved from a condo, a 2-bedroom townhouse in Stanford, over to Darien, and I paid lower taxes. And my house was twice as much. So if we just keep on not watching the rest of this stuff, we're going to be losing some of the things which does attract people into this town.
Jack, can I also add that, we do have great schools, and that's all fine and well, but I could not agree with your point more that it's the low taxes that is attractive as well. I think we need to understand that spending more money doesn't necessarily make our schools better. What makes our schools world class is that we have kids who want to learn and great parents who push their kids to learn. Money doesn't solve the issue. That's a big government, big spending mentality that I don't agree with. I think we can have great schools and not spend a lot of money doing it or at these levels that we're at.
Well, Peter, now my kids have been out of school for a long time, so I'll listen to those who are closer in age. I think one of the other things about why Darien has great schools, which is why you heard me not complain about the teacher contract, just quantify it, is that Darien, for the most part, has had some really great teachers. I remember dropping my kids off early at Middlesex to go and study for the exam they're having later in the day. I know teachers that stayed late to work with kids, not because they were getting paid overtime, because they were helping a kid or supported kids by going and watching sports or other things like that. Our teacher environment, and maybe it's changed, but I really don't think it has. It's our paying the teachers money to keep some of the teachers that we've had here, whether or not it's music, English, this, science, or whatever else it is part of the reason why Darien has a good school system. You know, I mean, Malin, your kid's a little bit closer. I mean, Peter, yours are. Beth, yours are. I mean, would you agree that it's our teacher staff that really is helpful to why we have good schools?
I think it's integral. But listen,
Yeah.
I'd like to, Jenny, I actually agree with you. I think we're actually agreeing here more than we understand. And my point is not that there is a numerical dollar amount that is affecting the Great Island acquisition is affecting us. To me, it's the what is sustainable, what is an arbitrary and purely subjective number, good or bad. And it's our choice as voters to decide what we want to do. Do we want to take a budget position where we're going to where maintaining a low mill rate is more important than anything else, or do we take a different one? I'm not saying one or the other is the right one, but because of that, it is subjective, it is arbitrary, and that's why I think the purchase affects us, and it does. I'm not saying it's a number like point whatever is pushing this up above a certain percentage, but it's just the atmosphere of of how we're approaching all these things, and we hear what is sustainable. I propose that as a rhetorical question to everybody. And I would,
Peter, I'm going to add something else, and maybe I come at it from a slightly different. The Board of Selectmen was up this year. But I can go through the Board of Selectmen budget, and there's maybe one of two things that I could say, okay, we could not add the half cop. Oh, they also took off the emergency management position that they had put in the prior year. I'm not talking about the 5,000 new flags that got added back. But when I'm looking at the Board of Selectmen, I thought that their operations, how they described things, what they were doing without adding a lot of staff. And I appreciate that we also raised the salaries of our clerical workers in town hall because they were out of what they were supposed to be. And that's also no different than paying for good teachers, because regardless of what everybody likes to say, it's not the first selectman and all of us elected officials that are making this town and running it. It's all the people in town hall and the Department of Public Works that are making this thing go and be a nice place to go and visit. So, the fact of the matter is I just thought the Board of Selectmen, who had a big increase, had a tighter budget.
Yeah, Jack. Yes, I mean, if you rewound this recording, about 3 or 4 minutes.
Yeah,
I spent the first 30 seconds.
Yeah, no, I know
what we needed to do in the board better with the Board of Ed, and I think we all, it's just a.
But I also think that we need better guidance. So that's something that I'm hopeful will be developed next year. That you're looking at what's going on. We have a guidance. We know what's happening. We know what's going to be happening with our debt. and we're planning accordingly. But in order for this to run, everybody has to work as a team. It's not, I mean, we're the last part of the team, but
Jack, the other thing that we need to do is decide what services we want to support in this town. And
yeah, yes, you and I are on that.
And it's way too late to do it in budget cycle. But one of the reasons that I didn't really have a problem with the Board of Selectmen budget is I thought John packaged it brilliantly. He stepped forward and said, I did not decrease services in this budget. And it's maybe time to start thinking about, what we want to provide in this town. I think we have a Mercedes Police Department. I'm not picking on them. I'm just saying, like, we have a great library. We have youth camps. We have everything is like, what are we willing to not provide through taxpayers? And I think there's nonprofits that would step up and do some of it. Anyway, it's neither here nor there right now, but I think we need to start deciding what we want to prioritize.
Well, but that goes along, and I agree with you, Melinda, but that goes along where I've said that I'd like to see an open space strategy. What's going on in town-owned property, what's going on in Great Island, what's going on in the Park and Recs, and are we doing dueling banjos? Because whoever comes first or plays the loudest gets the money, and then we find out we have the next thing to do. And so when you have rising healthcare costs, when you have salaries, and by the way, our salaries that we've increased all these people by is under inflation, guys. It's under what some of these salaries have been increasing for on a national level. So when we're looking at this, there's some tough decisions that have to be made on what we're going to do, as well as what our investments are. What are we going to be investing in? When we're doing something, and I'll mention it, if we do something in one of the elementary schools, we have to make sure that everybody's aware of what's being done, because you do it in one and all of a sudden the other four are going to get it. And I don't know that they've always been priced out, so you know what the full impact is. That's something that I had that conversation on earlier. But anyway,
I'm actually agreeing with you. We all want Mercedes everywhere.
I don't want a Mercedes. I want something that drives.
I understand, but I'm saying if you look across the town, everybody wants a Mercedes for all these different services, and that costs. And as Melinda said, some of these are costing more. And so that's where, the guidance, my reaction is the guidance is purely subjective. Is okay, well, where do we want to have the biggest impact in these services? And I feel like the budget discussions we're having are and the difficulty is because nobody wants to make the tough decisions. Everybody wants it all, and that we can't do that.
Well, I'm going to throw something out here, not to add to the conversation, but because I would like to get forward.
Yes.
But 2 years ago, I asked Duke Deneen, and we were meeting with Jim Palin, myself, Ed Rushecker, a couple members of the Board of Ed and the administration. And I said, we all tout ourselves as having the #1 high school in the state and in our dirt. I said, how much could we save if we end up being the #4 high school? And do you really think that's going to change the number of kids getting into the colleges that they're getting into? So, I like being a good school system. But, the top 5, the top 6, when you're looking at them, we're all pretty equal in what we're offering the children. And those that excel will excel. I'm never worried about the top students. I'm worried that we can take care of the ones that are having difficulty, that may not be in special ed, and that we're also servicing the middle children. The excelling kids take off on their own anyway. I mean, I have one of those. I also have one at the bottom side. So I always worry about the middle kids, and that's where I worry about. But anyway, are we ready to vote on the Board of Ed budget? Okay, all in favor? Say aye. Great. Now, Item 7 is discuss and take action on the above appropriations totaling $1,073,448,722 for the purpose of meeting the expenses of the town of Darien for the fiscal year commencing on July 1st, 2024 and ending on June 30th, 2025, as shown by the budget this day approved. I'm going to take that one by acclamation. That's an addition of the other two items. And since I'm assuming Jen can add, and I double checked her, which we always do anyway, how about we just all by acclamation saying these things add up and we'll move to the next item. Fine. Done. Jenny just put down by acclamation. Okay. So the mill rate. I have to go to the master budget plan. So, let's see, back this, sorry. Over here, that's the thing, that grand list. Okay, so first let's go through some of the grand list. And I'm going to share some of it just because we do have some new people and I want to be able to explain some of what we do here. All right. So we have.
Jack, can you move it first?
Yeah, sure.
Sorry.
Can somebody move that?
I'll move it.
I haven't read the mill rate, so why don't I read it first?
Okay.
Discuss and take action on that a tax of 0.69 million levied upon the last of the town of 11,105,599,944 on the property as of October 1st, payable equal of payable equal. I had to read where I was going. Two equal semi-annual installments. The first installment to become due or payable on July 1st, 2024, and the second installment to become due and payable on January 1st, 2025, provided that, however, that A, any taxpayer may pay both of said installments on July 1st, 2024. B, the personal property tax on motor vehicles in said town shall become due and payable in one single installment on July 1st, 2024, and C, any property tax in the amount not in excess of $100 shall become due and payable in a single installment due on July 1st, 2024. Okay, now we can move that. Does somebody want to move?
I'll move it.
Okay, I have Beth, I have Jenny, because that's the only people I can see. As second. Okay. I just wanted to go through roughly on the grand list and some of the things that happened. So this is what starts as the grand list, but then we make certain adjustments to that grand list because there's rebates and other amounts that we qualify. All right. And then we also calculate out what the last 5 years of our tax collection rate is. And then we adjust that by reducing the last 5 years average collection rate by 25 basis points. David Martin raised whether or not we shouldn't reduce it because the reality is that provides a pool of about $400,000 extra in what we're collecting. And you're going to see that we have extra monies of $500,000 in for fiscal year 2023 and about $600,000 of more taxes collected than what we put down in the budget for 2024. So that a mill rate, that adjustment of what we think we're going to collect, we then multiply that times the grand list. We make exemptions for real estate, exemptions for motor vehicles. There's some personal property tax that you're seeing at the bottom. There's also some veterans assessments, there's senior assessments, and other things like that, that reduce what we're going to have as a collection. The mill rate then, and I'm trying to get to that slide, we have changed, let's see where it is. Okay, so this is the current tax where they've evaluated over the last several years what we've actually collected. Our tax on supplemental and cars are going down this year because the car value is essentially the same. It went up during the pandemic because used cars were worth more. But with the mill rate going from 17 to 14, we're going to have a lower car tax this year. So all that is put into the budget, and we kind of determine what the collection rate's going to be. We then break out, and I don't have that slide readily available. We actually collect taxes and make a direct payment for the capital projects and put that directly into the reserve fund for capital non-recurring asset. That's something new. And then the rest is going into the general fund. So after we got done calculating out before that we need $173 million, we take away what we're anticipating for revenue on the town side. I think it's about 14 mil. And that's the amount that we need to raise for taxes. So we multiply what we believe the collection rate is plus the reductions on the grand list. We have what we now need for raise for taxes. And the grand list, that's how we get to the mill rate. What I've always said that we need to watch is we need to watch what's being requested, either in operating budgets or capital budgets, because the bottom, the denominator, which is the grand list, that's market driven. And the commercial real estate is evaluated every year, which is why they went up less than what the commercial went up less than what the residents did, because residents are every 5 years. So with that, they calculated out the 1469, and that in and of itself will be a significant tax increase for several people that have not only had their rates of their houses increased in that. I mean, I'm very honest, mine went up by 32%. I challenged 2 properties that I have for an association that went up by 50%, and which was crazy, quite honestly. But that's resulting in a 27% increase for the association for the joint properties that we have. And then I could actually calculate out, because I knew what the mill rate was, to see what the total thing is when we're trying to calculate out assessment in the year. So, look, all these numbers come in. It appears as if it's a low mill rate, but one of the things that I haven't had the chance to do is I am going to reconcile what the mill rate was last year and what the changes were, growth and grand list, what we've used for ARPA to pay for funds, what we've used for the capital expenses to pay, what special appropriations we're doing, any of the bonding that we might have done. So if we capitalized and bonded for certain interest on the band, then that's going to show to say, here's what this is how we actually got here. And throughout the year, we've been saying we didn't want to mask what the real cost to run the town is. So even with it, I think that Jim was saying that it's almost 6-7% increase for this year in taxes. And while the amount needed to be raised for taxes is only up by 4 or 5%, a good part of that is that our revenues are up much higher, basically because last year we had about 1.7 in our investment income, and this year we have 3.3 million. So, but if I'm looking down the road, and this is part of where I'm looking, at least, I can't speak for the Board of Finance. I believe they should be doing the same and do. But our investment income is eventually going to be coming down. We've had a lot of cash last year, but rates will be eventually coming down. And while we have more taxes, we're not going to have the cash lying around. This year we had 23 million of available funds from the bonding for HHR that wasn't used, that we earned money on, that we're not going to have because that's going to be spent. The completion of the 3 major projects will reduce our building revenue. So all these things will eventually be affecting us. And quite honestly, if we lose $1 million in investment income and $500,000 in building revenue because of these major projects being completed, there's not too many things in that budget that makes up a $1.5 million gap. And so that's part of what we have to be looking for as a committee as well as the board. And that's some of the things they're talking about. Anyhow, back to the mill rate. We can adjust the mill rate, and we've done it in the past, but I don't see any reason to adjust it. Does anybody have any reason? Probably we're going to be meeting in June, and I'll have more to explain, and I'm going to bring Jenny or Kate in, and I can show you some forms that allow us to get into deeper discussion on that. I just haven't had all the forms ready yet. So, are we ready to vote on the mill rate? Okay, go ahead, Holly. Are we ready? All those, or do you have a question?
Oh, I don't have a question. I'm ready.
All right, fine. All in favor of mill rate resolution, raise your hand. Okay. All opposed? It's unanimous. I'm not going. Okay. So now discuss and take action that the town of Darien acting through its Board of Selectmen.
Jack?
Yeah.
Just on the mill rate question.
Yeah.
I, for instance, what would interest me is I don't know off the top of my head what is our mill rate versus Greenwich's versus New Canaan's versus Westport's, whatever. I'm not suggesting that we open the can of worms and change the mill rate, but that might be those might be interesting stats to have in terms of our strategy for next year.
I agree. Part of that, though, is going to be determined, especially since the growth in real estate during the pandemic, matters where people are on their reval. So who had reval last year, this year, who still hasn't? Because even a New Canaan, if they haven't had their reval, they're going to be at 17. But in reality, once after they're done with the reval, they're going to be very close to us. We're typically in the top 5 lowest mill rates in the state. So, and I mean, the lowest mill rate in the state, and make no bones about it. Does somebody want to guess who has the lowest mill rate in the state?
Greenwich?
Yep.
Right. Yeah.
I did an analysis one time of looking at everybody's grand list for all 163 communities. And Greenwich alone represented 10 to 15% of the grand list of the entire state.
Sure.
Yeah. So, they're about 10 or 11. So, but if you're looking at their budget, they're having problems because they haven't been investing in schools. So, but yes, I can get that information for you.
Everybody's on this. I mean, I realize people aren't on the reval at the same time, but everybody does it every 5 years, right?
Right.
It's this, okay, just not the same 5 years.
That's correct. So I think Stanford's a year ahead of us. So, that's that. I just have to see who's doing what, because while you're having such a significant change in the real estate values, which we just saw during the pandemic, that's going to skew people who haven't had their reval yet, to account for that growth. So, but I can give
I guess what I'm saying, Jack, is aside from the mechanics of the finance process, if it is still true that our mill rate looks good, I mean, despite the technicalities of who went first with the reval and what have you, yeah, but if it's still the case that our mill rate looks good and looks in the right ballpark, yeah, compared to other, if you live in New York City or Toronto and you're deciding about you're going to move to Connecticut and what towns do you pick, we want to make sure that we're in the right ballpark. That's all I'm saying, right? Not to the closest 10 basis points, but that's a message that we as an RTM should be able to communicate to the people that we represent. It's something that the real estate agents that work in town should, they should have those ballpark figures available to them, et cetera. That's all I'm saying.
Well, but again, part of the reason why, well, first of all, these three developments are definitely helping the growth in our grand list. But I mean, I want people to think about it. Our grand list, not adjusted, but our adjusted grand list for a little town of Darien. I mean, we're a little town. I mean, now I've been up in New Hampshire where they have 600 people in a town. So we're not that little, but, or gone through Texas where you drive for miles before you hit the next town. But in a metropolitan area, we're a small town. And yet our grand list adjusted is $11 billion. That's a sizable amount, and that's what helps keep our taxes low. So anyway, but yes, I agree. All right. So let me go to the next one, 9. Discuss and take action that the town of Darien, acting through the Board of Selectmen and subject to the approval of said town at the annual budget meeting and the representative town meeting to be held on, that's interesting. They didn't correct the date. On May 13th, 2024, be authorized to borrow on a note or notes of the town in the sum of $5 million or so much thereof as may be necessary for the general expenses of the town pending the collection of either or both of said semi-annual installments of taxes on or before June 30th, 2025. Basically what this is it's a cash flow that we can have that they've never used. We're going to move it, don't worry. That during the pandemic, we moved it up to 10 million and then we moved it back down. So now, can we have somebody move it?
If we move it, we need to move it with the date adjusted.
I just did. I'm reading it. This isn't the final. They will be date adjusted. I'm reading the resolutions. That is a draft resolution. All right. By the time it gets to the RTM, it will be a corrected resolution because there's something we're adding to the next one. All right. So, so what I'm reading is the correct one, and they can, regardless of what's on the paper. So I have Beth and I have Peter M as the second. Yeah, I got you, Peter. This is just in case we're running a little short. So I don't think there's any further discussion, is there? We're ready to vote on this. All in favor, raise your hand. We'll go to the next one. Okay. Discuss and take action that the following appropriations for other funds are hereby made as detailed below for the 2024-2025 fiscal year as shown by the budget this day approved. And so I'm going to have to read this closer. Item A, $4,602,585 for the sewer operating fund for the purpose of meeting expenses of the town of the Darien Sewer Commission. B, $200,000 for the sewer assessment fund. C, $94,800 for the sewer capital fund. D, $923,100 for the parking lot administration fund. E, $275 for the parking lot capital fund. F, $1.4 million for the recreation program fund. And G, which wasn't on what I handed out, but will be by the time we vote on the 13th, $400,000 for the Great Island Special Revenue. These are all self-contained funds, but that being said what they are, we still have to authorize the expenditures of these funds. So that's what this is. During the time of the budget, we'll have Public Works speaking on the first five. Park and Rec will speak on F, and I'll probably initiate the 400 on the Great Island, and then if Mark wants to add and do it, he can. But this is more of an accounting entry saying the last year we had 400 or so expenses. This is authorizing that fund to spend 400,000, regardless of what the revenues are. So, do I have somebody moving that? I'll take Holly. I'll take Nicholas as the second. All in favor, say aye. We can move this along. Thank you. Okay, discuss and take action on the sum of $1,444,940,000 is appropriated to fund the redemption and the payment in whole or in part as determined by the first selectman, the town treasurer, and the Board of Finance, or any town official designated by the Board of Finance and the town finance director of the outstanding principal accrued interest in any call premium on any or on all or any of the portions of any issued of the town general obligation bonds issued in 2016, 2017, 2019, 2020, 2022, 2023, and 2024, together with the cost of issuance and the purpose for refunding them. This says that if an opportunity happens in the market, they don't need to come back to the RTM. About 15 years ago, there was a change in the market. They couldn't get to the RTM fast enough, and so we lost an opportunity and cost the town money. So in this particular case, we pre-authorize saying, go do it. However, based upon what some of our rates are, we're not doing it right now. So authorizing it, I wouldn't anticipate that we're doing anything in the next coming year. So I need somebody to move. I'm going to take Peter, and I'll take Charles, Peter M, and I'll take Charles on the other side to move it. All in favor, say aye. That's fine. We already did item 13, item 12, item 13. We're not going to do tonight because it's not ready for prime time. I'm going to make some brief conversations on item 14 and 15. We'll be meeting sometime in June, so we can address those afterwards to discuss certain things on the budget, certain other things that we can sit down with Jim Palin and discuss what we might want to do or how we work together in that. On next scheduled meeting is Monday, May 6th. If there are any outstanding items that come up, we will have that meeting. Rules this meeting on the 30th. If anything comes through, I'm not anticipating it, but if it does, then we'll meet on the 6th. If not, we're canceling that. The other thing that I want to talk about is I think the next meeting after that, I believe, is the 28th of May, and I will be changing that meeting for two reasons. First of all, I've been pushing to change the June 3rd meeting of the RTM back by 2 weeks to June 17th. There's a couple of items that are outstanding that may not be ready as of June 3rd. And I didn't think the RTM wanted to have 2 meetings in June, one being a special one. So if we make a decision to move that one back, that's fine. That also gives us a little bit more time. The other reason we're moving the 28th is I will be landing in Kennedy Airport, and basically at the day after the budget, I'm out of here for 2 weeks. So and I will not be checking on any town email during my absence. I may be moving it so that if something does come up in June, I'm anticipating in June we'll have the possibly something on Hanson Road. We'll have possibly something on Great Island. We will have the Pledge of Allegiance issue. We'll also have the possibly the Board of Ed security initiative, and we'll also have fixing the deficit for the Board of Ed. We're probably going to be active on some of those, so I'd like some time to get into that on what's going on. I'm going to ask people who are floating things around to copy Bill, Beth, Peter, and Jenny, and for us to distribute, make sure that you guys are distributing it to the full committee so that you guys are at least aware of what people are proposing. So, and then you can bring me up to date. So when I return. So with that, we have outstanding minutes. Jenny, you can do that.
You should have received last week or the week before. It was right after that, 2 weeks ago almost. Minutes from our April 8th meeting. Does anyone have any questions, comments, or any typos I made? Let me know. And if there are no comments, can I have a motion to approve the minutes from our April 8th meeting? I got Malin and Beth and ready to vote. All in favor? Looks good to me. Unanimous. Thank you.
So I'm 20 minutes over my over-under of what I anticipated this was going to be. So with that, and being that this is a special meeting, I want to thank everybody for everything that they did on the budget. I intend to embarrass everyone when we do the budget on the 13th. I'm going to ask everybody to stand so you can be recognized. If I remember to do that, I like doing that because people should know the amount of time, the fact that probably we attend the most meetings of any committee out there. We do a lot of work. There's a lot of good conversation. And I do believe that we have been heard by the other boards throughout the budget. They may not agree with us, but at least we were heard. So I want to thank everyone for that. And with that, so I don't go too much over my over-under, I pegged 9 o'clock. Board of Ed killed me once again. Can I take a motion to adjourn? I have Jenny and I'll take Nick, and all in favor. Thank you all. Have a good evening. Thank you again. And I'll get back to you on whether or not we'll having a meeting on the 6th.